It's 5:30. We will call the meeting to order. Will you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Will do. Alderman Redpath.
Here.
Alderman Senor. Alderman Turner.
Here.
Alderman Fulgenzi. Alderman Proctor. Alderman DeCenso.
Present.
Alderman McMiniman.
Here.
Alderman Tylen. Alderman Donlin.
Here.
Alderman Hanauer.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, a quorum is present.
Thank you. The way we're going to do this is the first order of business is going to be presentations. I've asked Doug Brown to come in and give us a overview of the utility. And he's going to do that. And I think we've got some other people going to talk about the security. Is that right, John? Okay. So with that, I will ask Doug to go ahead.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
You have Alderman Proctor on the line, if you would like.
Hey, how you doing, Andrew?
Do we have to? Do we need to vote to let him?
Yes, please.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. We allow Alderman Proctor to attend the meeting via telephone. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, the ayes have it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, so we had a few different topics to discuss tonight, kind of varied. The first one is our third quarter financial presentation. It's a little bit delayed just because, we're trying to get this meeting scheduled and trying to wait for it. And the fourth quarter is not going to be available for a while, so this is why it's a little bit somewhat dated. But our November cash position was $22 million. That's 40 days of cash on hand. But I want to point out with Moody's, where they calculate theirs is it's really 57 days because they look at all the cash that's available per the master bond ordinance. Whereas, we're looking at not including the restricted accounts just because it's, prudent financial planning. But with them, they're including the environmental and regulatory initiative and rebate fund of the $13.5 million. So that's why theirs is at 57 days. So this is just basically a historical viewpoint of our 60 days of cash on hand for the last 3 fiscals per month. And then our revenues are down under budget for retail and wholesale sales. Again, we've pointed out this before, but with the cooler summers, that has an impact on sales for both retail and wholesale. And you can kind of see that here as a little bit more clarity with, when you look at it per month across the fiscals and seeing how the summer months are well under budget. And natural gas prices actually are, suppressing the market, keeping the energy prices low. So for our expenses, we're under budget. And just as, we're lower in revenues, we're also lower in expenses. For some of that is just because if you don't, purchasing or, generating the energy for that, we don't need to buy fuel. So part of that expense is also fuel costs, whether it's, coal or gas or limestone, whatever the case may be, chemicals. That's basically about half that variance for fuel expenses. So we're still doing well in controlling expenses. And here's just another view for expenses across the months, across 2 different fiscals compared to our the budget year of FY18. Debt coverage ratio at the end of November was 2.13. And we're looking for 1.25, so we're doing well. And if you include the corporate payment in that, we're at 1.9, that's really what the rating agencies are looking at. Oops. We might be missing a slide. There's supposed to be one in there for the pilot, just by a month. To month over the 3 fiscals. We'll get that to you. Then this is our debt coverage, our annual debt service for the electric fund. There really has been no changes with this, though, recently, since the last time I presented it. For the November cash position for water, we're at $7 million, and the Denver days of cash is 105. Again, we're looking for that 60 days of cash, so the water fund's doing okay. And then here you can see that the water fund days of cash over the various months for the last 3 fiscals. Revenues are basically flat. You can see that's just basically a 0.3% decline in what we expected for revenues. Again, with a cooler summer, we're not going to hit our targets with that. Our expenses, though, are well maintained on the water side, 16.1% lower. Here you can see the revenues. Again, if you look at August, you can see that they're lower than expected just because of a cooler summer, a wetter summer. And expenses, again, that's just a comparison across the various months over the last 2 fiscals. The debt service for the water is 2.09, and if you include the auxiliary services, it's 1.9. Again, that's what the rating agencies are looking at. That's why we report both numbers. Debt service for the water. Here, I don't know if you recall, but in January we did get a negative outlook on the water fund. It's tied to also basically when the corporate funds, the GO rating gets lowered, the water fund also automatically gets lowered. So that's why we took a hit with that. And then this new debt structure shows basically what's included that we refunded our bonds. We're receiving an extra $170,000 now moving forward annually. So we refunded our bonds. Both the water fund and the electric fund are, we're working hard to try to make sure that we keep our labor budget in control, and we're both under about 7% there. This is just a snapshot of the pilot where we're at and what we expect. So that concludes basically the finance presentation. And then I want to turn it over to John Davis and Greg Yackel for talk about some new rates that we have, some specialty rates. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you. That works pretty well. I want to talk to you about some new electric rate classifications we're going to have. We're going to phase these in, a couple of these in over the next 3 months. They're to address economic development, provide some additional optional rates for our customers, and for not only development and retention, but potentially load shifting, okay? Currently, the utility does not have any time of use rates. And with any kind of load shifting, you're incentivizing customers to consume or shift load to off-peak periods where there's more infrastructure available and cheaper energy. And then lastly, we'll talk a little about green energy purchases. The utility will be moving forward with doing a small pilot scale project of a solar farm. So we'll need to put together marketing materials and rates to kind of marry those two. And we're in the process of working through those now. High load factor rate is something we've been working on for a little while. It's intended to attract data centers, server farms, okay? I'll explain a little more what a load factor is. I've got a graphical in the next slide. We're going to have an economic development rider as well, and those are the two I'll be covering today. But in the next 3 months, you can expect to see some information on industrial rate. We're currently doing some data collection on industrial customers to try to understand various time of use rates, such as critical peak pricing and those things. We also are have an electric vehicle time of use rate we're looking at, as well as, like I mentioned, green energy, where we're looking at where customers would purchase blocks of renewable energy, and that would incentivize and drive where the utility probably goes with solar in its portfolio. We've also got some distributed energy resource rates we're dabbling with. Those are intended to address rate equality and infrastructure cost and those things that we currently have buried in our energy rate. This is a graph on high load factor, and I'm not going to try to get too technical here, but this example you see, the black horizontal line is actually the size of the transformer we install for a high load customer. And a high load factor customer could be a bigger customer, but for our example, in the rate we put together, we wanted the minimum load to be 2,500 kVA. What you see in the red line is a customer that has a very high load factor. That's approximately 90%. If you look down the side, you're at 2,500, your black line, that's how large an infrastructure we need to install to serve not only that load, but the load in orange. The load in orange would be a typical customer. You'll see that in the off-peak hours, midnight to 7 a.m. Central Standard Time, they're pretty low. Then they start ramping up in the morning, and then they hover around there, and then we end up having, we end up setting our peak, about 5 p.m. or so, okay, and then it just tails off from there. What's interesting about this graph is the amount of infrastructure installed to serve both customers is the same. However, the customer that you see there in orange with a 45% load factor, which is about shown there, will consume 8.9 million kilowatt hours. A high load factor customer would double that. Okay, so it's a very energy intense load. It's something that we're interested in attracting to Springfield. When we went to put this rate together, we worked with the chamber, we worked with a company called BLS that helps companies site data centers. We did a comparison to other utilities that had data center rates, and this was the most competitive rate we could come up with. Came up with a customer charge of $1,000 per month. A demand is kind of interesting, it's $650 per kVA, not kW. Energy charge of about 4.5 cents a kilowatt hour. Okay, here again, this customer is going to consume twice the energy that an average customer would consume.
Great.
When you're using initials or whatever, could you give the description of it the first time you use it so everyone at home will understand what you're talking about, please?
Okay.
Like when you mentioned the KVA.
KVA. KVA is an electrical engineering term. I don't want. KW is watts. Okay, and VA it takes into account reactive power we have to provide for motors and things like that, and the combination of the two is apparent power, or VIA. Okay. None of our rates currently bill any KVA. I'd liken this high load factor, if you want to picture a Walmart, a data center would take up generally about the same amount of property, except from a demand standpoint, it's a 2-story Walmart, and from an energy standpoint, it's 4 Walmarts. Okay. The high load factor provides competitive energy rates to attract economic development to Springfield, typical of a large data center. It would be additional new load. And it also provides some potential fiber optic customers for CWLP. There's fiber optic that runs from Chicago to St. Louis. There's a number of data centers and backup data centers in each of those locations. So it provides Springfield an opportunity to be a geographically diverse backup site potentially for data centers. You'll see as well we have some economic development riders that will be in here. There are currently economic development riders that have been drafted, but unfortunately expired, that we've had in code. One expired back in June 30th of 2001. That was for rate 48. That was our actually last rate 48 customer was Cargill Pillsbury. Okay, so it's been expired for some time. And then we had one June 30th of 2014 for major and minor industrial and non-industrial customer expansion. And what you'll see is that this is basically putting these back in play with some timelines to them. These economic riders, development riders would exclude a rate 48 industrial, because the rate 56 for the state, and the high load factor rate. The industrial and the high load factor rates are going to be rates that have very thin margins. We really don't feel like we can discount their utilities any more than that. It allows high load factor customers and industrials to come in with some certainty about their rates. They're not making an investment because of an economic discount for 3 years or 5 years. They need a rate that's going to be more steady than that. There are several parts to the economic development rider. There's 4 areas. These 3 are industrial major expansion, which would be incremental demand increases of 125 kW or more, an industrial minor expansion of 75 kW or more, kW being thousands of watts. Okay?
Thanks.
So that could read 125,000 watts or 75,000 watts. Non-industrial customers not engaged in retail. Okay, so what we're thinking about here is maybe a large law firm, large insurance companies, hospitals potentially. And there we're looking at incremental demand increases of 250 kW and incremental, and to qualify they have to have an incremental demand increase plus average base load of 750 kW. Then the fourth element of this is for non-residential, okay? So it's average peak demand of at least 75 kW, currently receiving service from another electric supplier, as well as locating within the corporate limits.
So we've talked about high commercial rates, and is this the mechanism that we're using to break that down now with the industrial versus the non-residentials and the commercial? Doug, do you remember us talking about that, about trying to lower the rates because it was not properly used the right way or something like that? I can't remember.
This is really the economic rider. So this is about either somebody expanding their current business, again, and it's per the guidelines here. This is not something the guidelines aren't something we've created new. This is already existing. We're just reestablishing it, basically. Where commercial rates are set, that's a different issue. Eventually, we will do a rate study, though.
That's what.
But we need to do the IRP first.
Okay.
The integrated resource plan. Once we get that, and then we set kind of the direction where we want to go with the city, with our basically our generation, our cost of power. Then we do a rate study, and then we can look at residential commercial rates and that kind of thing.
Because that, if I remember our discussion, that was because the current commercial rates are, they need to be broken down in different categories, right? Because they,
right.
Because
yes, we do have different classes for commercial.
Okay, all right. Alderman Donlin.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Yankel, nice to see you again.
Nice seeing you.
In a while. I think you mentioned a couple times that we're going to have these new rates. And are you referring to something that is forthcoming for the council to consider, or
That's correct. They're forthcoming. The high load factor. We actually have a high load factor that's on first reading tomorrow.
the data center one, right?
Yes, the data center one.
But just that one's on tomorrow, from what I saw on Friday.
That's correct.
Okay.
Excuse me, the plan would be over the next few months, roll them out one at a time. So, probably in the next cycle, have another rollout.
Wonder. I appreciate that. Well, I've noticed, and I've had several conversations with business groups and business folks throughout the community talking about economic development in general. And one of the things that comes up, and I really appreciate you obviously taking this to heart, was the fact that there was a study done a few years ago that looked at our rates for data centers specifically,
right,
and how we aren't competitive. And what I'm hearing you say is this is going to help make us more competitive, which is wonderful.
That's correct.
What I'd like to do, and it probably isn't the place to do it, but I would welcome an opportunity to sit down with the utility and understand how that compares to areas that have been successful in getting data centers and having a better understanding of that. and, probably don't need to dive that deep here today, but I think this concept of trying to make Springfield more competitive is wonderful. I'd like to learn more about each one of these individual areas, and quite frankly, I'd like to learn about it before we have a meeting about it, a public meeting about it, because that provides me an opportunity to ask a lot of questions, get into the nitty-gritty details, and then, of course, we welcome the opportunity to talk about it publicly and to debate if there is a debate or a discussion. But it would be great if we could learn more about these things before they're dropped, an ordinance is dropped. And that's why I appreciate you giving us a heads up on the things that are not in ordinance presently, because now we know they're coming, and we'll have an opportunity to sit down and talk about them.
So I only dropped one on you for the time being.
Oh, well. But it's a good one to drop. But I would like to sit down and chat.
Okay, absolutely. I'm glad to do that.
Any other questions? Joe?
Greg, you mentioned that you've had some communications with the Chamber of Commerce on these economic development riders.
Yeah.
Is there a committee at the Chamber devoted to this area of utility involvement?
Well, let me back up on the economic development riders, because I wasn't nearly involved in the economic development riders. I did work with the Chamber some time ago and a company called BLS in regards to the development of the high load factor rate. Okay, so absolutely in regards to the high load factor rate, we've been working with the Chamber on that some time ago, as Alderman Donald referred to. As far as the economic development stuff,
Yeah. So basically with that, we just kind of look at some comparisons of what other communities are doing. And we just basically said, okay, well, we basically are recommending, so, and we'll get to that here in the next slide, basically show you what the percentages of reduction are, for the fifth year, the fourth year, on down to the last year. But so that's basically where we looked at, is that we have this economic development rider that we can't use because it's expired. So we felt that there was a need to help with the city, and this is a good opportunity to help attract, either growth from existing customers, or maybe we can get a new customer.
When were the previous economic incentives first put in place, and when did they expire?
Was it? Oh, you did say that. That's right. Yeah, so they expired June 30th, 2014 for the major and minor industrial and non-industrial. And then there was another one that was called a Rate 48 Industrial that expired in 2001.
And do you know roughly when these came into being?
No, I don't have that information as far as original ordinances when they were put in place.
And if you could obtain that information, and then also have some kind of idea of how many users there were of these incentives during the time that they were available to customers.
I can tell you with the Rate 48 one, there was just one.
That was the Cargill.
Cargill, Pillsbury.
And that was in the late 90s. We'll have to get back to you on if, I think there may have been just maybe a few on the other one, maybe the economic rider.
Okay.
The one that we're actually currently discussing.
Hey, Chris may know.
You know that, Chris?
More precisely.
There was never more than 3 or 4 at a time. We had Mellow Cream, Nudo, Big R. There's never been more than 3 or 4 on it at a time.
And I realize you can roll these out one at a time, but are any of these of a new, and maybe you've already covered this, are any of these new in nature? They're trying to target a different user than the previous economic incentive riders?
As far as I know, it's the same format. We're just changing the percentages of discounts.
And are we increasing the incentive or leaving it flat, or what are we doing with the incentives?
It declines as the customer is aged from when they first come in. As time goes on,
We have that on the
That's the next slide.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Chuck, would it help if we save the questions until last, because just like this situation, it said it's going to be on the next slide.
Okay. Some of the aldermen wanted to ask specific questions to something, so that's why I let it go. Go ahead, Greg.
Chuck, yes.
Just one last thing to clean up before we go on to this one. One of the other things, this I think is very helpful for those existing businesses that may expand or that want to annex into the city of Springfield and currently taking service from other utilities as well. The economic development rider for major industrial expansion and non-industrial customers is a 5-year reduction, starting at 30% the first year, and then reducing that by 5% each year for a total of 5 years. The economic for minor industrial expansion and then non-residential is a 3-year program starting out at 20% and then reducing it by 5% each year as well.
Questions? Go ahead, Alderman.
This is more for, I guess, John and Doug, but I mean, this all starts at generations, and there's been studies and all that that's been out. We asked 3 years ago to get a price per megawatt per unit, and it's been 3 years, and I know it's a complicated thing, but it's math, right? And I would like to know when we can. I'd like to be able to get something by the next meeting that we have. I mean, to me, that's very important. We got to know what it costs to produce our product. You know, and I know we got, you know, the different debt ratios and all that, but I think that we really need to have a cost per what it costs for us to generate.
Well, you know, that's something that we have been working on for a while now, and as part of that, we're going to be feeding that information right into the IRP, so that third party is going to be looking at the cost of our generation as a part of that, and recommending what to be done with those units. Should they be retired? When they should be retired? And looking at what's the best replacement, you know, for those units as well.
Yeah. Well, my only thing is I think I asked 3 years ago when we first got on council. And I've yet to see anything, you know, from you guys. And I think that, you know, it is important that we're able to produce that. So if we could get something by the next quarter meeting, that'd be great.
Yeah, we can start sharing with some of that information with you. But, I mean, we won't be deciding anything at that point. I mean, we're going to finish the IRP process with a third party and then have them make the recommendations back. But I'll get to that here in a minute at the end of the presentation with the IRP.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions on this segment? Now we'll go ahead and move to.
I got a quick. Doug, I know this isn't finalized yet, but have you all approached HIP Advertising, because they're going to come out with this great video about Springfield, and I think that would be a good source to have in there, that we have this utility that's city-owned, citizen-owned, and we are offering great discounts to people that want to come and develop in our city.
Oh, yeah. Oh, and what's this through then?
It's HIP Advertising.
It's a tourism campaign. It's not an economic development campaign.
Oh.
But still, we should be tying these things together, because we know our population is decreasing, and we need something in there that's catching the eye of developers and people that we're trying to draw to Springfield. Even though it's just for tourism, we can slip in some things that say we're right for economic development.
Could be a different campaign. I agree we don't advertise ourselves sufficiently, but
That's the problem. We cut things off, and we're not thinking outside the box. We're just straight inside the box, and until we get outside the box, we're going to be in the situation that we're in. So I just wanted to make my statement, Mr. Brown. Thank you.
Any other questions on this? We'll move to security.
Okay, our next couple sections are going to talk about security and some Lake Springfield safety. When we talk about security, we really need to start talking about our patrols. You know, we have security around the clock, Monday through Sunday, if you will, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And that security patrols all of our lake parks, substations, electrical substations, our water tanks, all of our CWLP facilities. And they actually, it's not a set route that they always take. It's a random patrol in order to, you know, not to get into a routine where somebody could follow them or know where they're going to be. But Lake Security also patrols our lake. So they have boats on the water year-round, mainly during the summer. That's in conjunction with DNR and the City of Springfield Police Department also. Kind of moving to talking about some of the things we've had some discussions here in the past is boat licenses on the lake. There are two types of boat licenses that we have, the annual boat license and then the temporary boat license. The annual, actually the reminder was just sent out about a month ago for all of our individuals that currently have a boat license to renew their license for this year. And in the first about 20 days, we have over 1,000 boat licenses sold already. And then we have our temporary boat license. Those are for 48-hour periods, and those are $15 per license. The majority of those are individuals that come in and pre-fish a tournament. So they come out and fish a tournament on the weekend. They come in on Thursday. They buy a $15 license, and they're on the lake Thursday and Friday before the tournament starts. There's been some talk about should we or should we not require boat license for fishing tournaments. Currently, we do not. It's kind of been an unspoken rule with DNR that we would not charge a boat license for people coming on because DNR stocks the lake. You know, they've put millions of dollars worth of fish in our lake over the course of the last 20 years, and they would prefer us to keep it open as much as possible. We usually have between 100 and 120 tournaments on the lake every summer, and actually throughout the year. During the summer, they've been filling up already. People scheduling their tournaments, and for these tournaments, we have people that come in from all across the state, from other states. We've had national high school tournaments. We've had state tournaments here for high school fishing, and that's always been a good money bringer for the lake and for the city. As you can see from our boat license, our sales over the last about 15 years, we average about 3,600 boat license sales a year. That's the annual sales, and about 725 of the temporary sales. So, every summer about 725 people are coming in buying that 2-day boat license coming in. And that equates to approximately $230,000 of revenue for the water department every year. Now, we had that spike up in 2009 where we broke 260. I can only imagine that was probably because of we had some large motors, boats coming with large motors buying, purchasing their licenses that year is why that was so high, because the numbers was average. There wasn't a greater number in that time frame. Any questions on that stuff real quick?
Well, I got a couple questions about the lake security. So they patrol all the parks and all of our substations and stuff like that. How do you know they're doing that?
They have cards, and they write down as they go into every park, and they radio it back in, and we track all that way. We don't have a system in place.
They can't do that from the office? They can't just write that down on the card in the office?
Oh, they could, but I do trust our employees that they don't pencil whip it all.
Have you guys ever thought about using the piping system that they'll take a pipe with them and they have to punch a button every time they get someplace and so we know that it's getting done? Because I don't ever see a lake security car, and I live out there.
We've talked about a number of mechanisms that they could utilize to verify that they're in those locations. Be honest with you, it comes down to money and not wanting to put those in place because it is an expensive proposition. In order to worry about, to verify that they're at those parks and those other locations.
It's not
they go to the parks to close them up and lock them at night, so we know they're doing that, so we know they're out there.
Okay. And go ahead.
What about, are there cars got GPS in them?
Lake security cards do not currently have GPS.
I think that would probably take care of a lot of it because you could have the radio on a computer watch knowing that they're there.
Yeah, we've never put them on those vehicles. When we started using GPS on our other vehicles, we looked at the water department and T&D first because they're, where they work and they're global throughout the entire city. We've never approached the union to get it in their contract to allow us to have GPS in their vehicles, but it is something that we started discussing here in the last 6 months or so.
To me, that's just safety. If somebody, if you get somebody that they can't get a hold of, at least you'll be able to find out where the car is so that, I mean, I realize we got to go through the union, but that's a safety issue there.
Yeah,
for the
we're
employee.
pursuing it so we can get the GPS on our vehicles. We agree. We need to get that done.
So how many,
We're proceeding that way with all our vehicles.
how many security vehicles do you have? Do you know?
I believe 7 or 8.
Just,
Good thing it's not very many.
well, I count them every day when I go by there at the office, so I know how many they got.
How many is it? Am I right?
There's 7. They're there 24/7. That's why I say, are they out there patrolling?
Well, yeah, they are. They are. And they also make rounds around the plant also. The one thing, they always have a guard or an officer stationed at the power plant, at least one at the power plant, and usually 2 at the power plant, so.
So what about the lake patrols? We used to have security doing lake patrols. They doing that?
They are on the lake, yes. We have during the summer months from May through September, we have 2 officers that are assigned to the lake from
And they're
7 till 8 o'clock at night.
And they're and sorry, John, this is going to get a little hotter. Okay, just so we know. So are they the ones that are responsible for putting the buoys back in place when they blow out of and posting those?
That's actually my next slide.
Okay.
See, that's what I said.
I'll let
Or
you
actually,
get,
maybe
I'll
2
let you
slides,
get
but
that.
it's coming to right up. But quick answer, yes. Was there another question over here?
Because before we go any further, John, I got a member of the Lake Council of Clubs out here and a neighborhood association, and the buoys problem is a very serious problem for those folks because, as you know, it's a safety issue. Somebody's going to get hurt or killed, and if those aren't in place, and that's a very important part of this. So,
Well, I think that will come out because of what the purpose of those buoys are. So we'll talk about that here in a second.
go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry, Doug.
All right, Lake Springfield water safety. Buoys. Pardon? Your first slide is what? Yeah. We have 2 types of buoys that we use at the lake. The big orange buoys, the ones you see that are about 2 feet in diameter and round, those are the ones that are used to mark hazards, not the no-wake buoys. Keep that in mind. A no-wake buoy, the purpose of it is to minimize shoreline erosion from extensive wave action. Those are the ones we have around the lake. There are 240 of those throughout the lake. The hazards, when we find them, we mark them with the large buoy, just like we did at the old marina. We've had those discussions. We put some out there. After last week's discussion, we verified, and put some more out there. So they are there. So again, those are 2 different purposes. All the ones around the lake are not meant for hazards. They're meant as a no-wake buoy to make sure that we don't have shoreline erosion, okay? And with that, I couldn't find any real guidelines on how we utilize those buoys, so I sat down with security, and we came up, and the water department came up with these guidelines going forward, okay? So we're going to label numerically all of the buoys, 1 through 240, and have them GPS located so we know exactly where each one of those are, okay? Now, we're not buying a GPS on the buoy. We're going around with the handheld and marking them when we put them in place.
Doesn't the fire department already have the GPS software that we can use to mark?
Yeah, we have it.
Okay.
Yeah, we have that.
Right.
But like I said, we're not buying a separate GPS issue for each one.
All right.
So we'll mark where everyone is, and we'll have that in our database.
Okay.
And then we're going to go around periodically, at least monthly, but more often probably, and inspect to make sure that they have not been moved. One of the issues we've had in the past is that people move them because they want them in front of their house instead of in front of the neighbors 2 doors down. So we're going to put them in place, we're going to mark them, we'll keep them on that spreadsheet and verify that they're always there. And while we're doing that GPS inspection, if you will, to make sure they're there, we'll look for any damage to them, make sure the labels are still on them, make sure that, any reflection issues that we have, and we'll change them out as need be. Last year we changed out over 60 buoys, and we're in the process of, we've bought more, we have more in stock, so we can change out more as they're needed. The other thing we're going to do is maintain a minimum stock that we never had in the past. So we're going to always make sure we have 40 of them in stores with all the chain and all the weights in order to replace them as needed. So those are all new guidelines that we're putting in place for this summer to make sure that we don't have the issues that we've had in the past.
Okay.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit now about bridge lights. We've had some issues with bridge lights going out. We've had some issues at the railroad, especially from the vibration. And we've done some work in order to try to minimize that vibration so the lights don't burn out, if you will, from the vibration. On the railroad, the right side's green, the left side's red. And then on I-55 Bridge and Lindsay Bridge, you have red on the pillars so people can know where the pillars are, and then green for the middle spans. That's how they should be. Now, on those, some of them are easier to change the lights than others. All the pillars and the railroad bridges, at normal lake level, we can work off the barge and a ladder to change out those lights. Currently, with the lake being as low, we don't have access to do that. Last summer, we were in the process of changing all the lights, make sure they're all working. We had some other issues where security got pulled off for various reasons, and we weren't able to get them all changed. But our plan right now is to make sure that everything's working as soon as possible going into this summer, especially once the water comes back up. And then when they redid Lindsay's Bridge a couple years ago, when they did the revitalization of that bridge and redid that bridge, they put some arms so we could extend those arms down and lift them up and change those out. So we don't have any special equipment that we need to change those lights on the bridge. Unfortunately, the I-55 bridge does not have that. We need to have a specialized truck that we can hang somebody over, basically go over and underneath in order to change out those lights, because we can't reach them from the lake. There's no other way to get it done. That requires IDOT to give us approval to close the road, or we at least have to close a lane, and that has proven difficult in the past for us. We don't own a truck that can do that either, so we need to contract with a electrical company or someone that has that truck. I've been trying to get in contact here recently with an Ageezy or some other company in order to do that for us, so they can take care of all the IDOT contracts, all the IDOT permits, in order to get that done. So that's what we're doing there moving forward. Just got some pictures of those coming up. You can see the railroad bridge on the green and red, excuse me, and then Lindsay's Bridge with that's the arm that can swing down. We can lift over, pick that arm up, and change out that light when it goes out. And then again, that's the one on the pillar that we can change from the boat at full pool. And same with the I-55 bridge, we can change at full pool versus the one up here. You can see that's tucked up underneath. And that one, we can't safely change from the water. We need to get some mechanism to do it from the bridge itself, and that does require the IDOT approval. Some boating safety clinics. We talk a lot about children, if they're going to operate boats, needing to have a special certificate in order to drive a boat. Like a driver's license, drive a car, they need a certificate to drive a boat. A new rule says that anyone born after January 1, 1988, so that's basically anyone under 30 years of age, has to have that certificate in order to operate a boat safely on any body of water, not just Lake Springfield, but any body of water. What we've done is we've partnered with the Land League and Power Squadron for the last, I'm not sure, number of years that I know of, to provide safety training courses, okay? And at the end of that safety training course, they receive their certificate. We offer that for free. Now, individuals can go to DNR's website and do the course online, but that costs anywhere from $30 to $45, depending on which site they go to off DNR in order to do the course. So we provide the courses a couple times a year. We have the Weed Queeter safety boat clinics and the Land League and Power Squadron boating ABCs. Ours are 2-day sessions. They're half-day, 4-hour each. There's one in April, one in May coming up. And then the Power Squadron has one currently going on. Then they have 2 more left, excuse me. And those are 4-day sessions. So those are 2 hours for 4 days. And you have to attend all 4 days or both days of ours. And the Power Squadron also performs our class, teaches our class, in order to make sure that people have the certificates that they need. Again, the thing to remember is you have, if you're born after January 1, 1988, so it's a 30-year-old person basically has to have the certificate in order to operate a boat. anything over 10 horsepower going forward. And I think that's going to be, as that goes on, that'd be more and more of an issue. Any other questions? I'm looking, okay.
Is there, does any of the boat, the different, like Land of Lincoln, does anybody actually get people behind the wheel of a boat? I think I know the answer to that. Yeah, because I'll tell you, having been a lake patrol officer, that's one of the biggest problems that you see. That, and if you want to have a really good time at 4th of July when the fireworks are going to go off, go sit at Lindsay Bridge and watch the people backing trailers in and out that don't do it. It's comical. Yeah. And boats that fall off the trailer and all kinds of stuff. But I mean, we need to encourage somebody. I know, like the marina, when they sell a boat, they need to really spend more time, or the boat dock, working with people, because they don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to come into a dock, and that's how people get hurt, and they just don't do it. And I think it'd be wise from our standpoint to try to push that.
We can talk to the local boat dealers. I think there has been discussion in the past. I'm not sure I don't know the boats, so I'm not sure what they provide or what they don't provide. But it is classroom training that they do, that they're not going out.
I can speak to that.
Here's a man from the Power Squadron himself. So
there you
go. For qualification purposes, I'm a past commander of the Land of Lincoln Power Squadron, and I'm a district officer, the district secretary, and now moving to the administrative officer, which covers 12 or 13 chapters across Illinois and so forth. We have on occasion a plan in the Power Squadron to have a day when we can put somebody behind the wheel of a boat or at the tiller of a boat. It has not been an ongoing part of the training, because many times people have their boats and many of their kids have been operating these boats, not only the children but the adults too. They've been operating them before they ever came to us. They just didn't know the rules, okay? But we have talked about it, but there is a cost associated with it, and then there's a special insurance issue there. So there's been some limitation, and none of the from what we know, none of the training organizations actually put you out in the boat. But we talk about this at the district level in terms of how we can get them out. And maybe get them out in a group, show them what to do, and then while we're sitting there, maybe take them right around in a little bay. But I have not seen it and I've been in the Land of Lincoln Power Squadron since I came back to Springfield in 2003, and I joined about 4 or 5 years before that when I left Springfield in 1997. So it is something that we're aware of, but there's gas, and then there's somebody's boat, and that's an issue for all of it. So
it's just an area that, and I'm not talking about just for kids, adults.
No, adults now, because
adults are worse than the kids driving.
This rule is not brand new. It's been out there for 4 or 5 years now. Yeah. It's just that it now encompasses, like John said, 30-year-olds, when it was pretty much just young folks. But
right,
it's something we're looking at.
Thought I'd throw that out there. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken.
Any other questions on security? You're done.
So now I want to talk about our new outage map. We've kind of put it out there a little bit on social media, but it's a new way for our customers to view and track outages. Our guys do a great job of minimizing outages, but this is going to be a great tool for everyone to use when they do occur. So with our electric outage map, you can find it on our homepage under the Outage Center, and it's going to show you the number of outage locations, the number of customers per location. It's going to actually show crew assignments, where the crews are headed to. Some of that requires manual entry. So if we're getting hit with a lot of outages, it might take a little bit of time to get it updated. But our guys will try to do a job of getting that updated as quickly as possible. But you can go basically and check out your own home, your residence, basically using your phone number. It's on the account. It's got to be tied to the account, and then input your address number, and then you'll be able to see. It'll pull up basically your house and tell you if there's an outage going on. And this is kind of basically what it looks like. On your left, it's basically a desktop view, and then on your right, it's a mobile view. The main thing here is to remember that this is not a reporting tool. It's to monitor, to track where things are at. So if there is an outage and you want to report it, you need to call 789-2121, just like we normally do, and go through our system to do that. But, instead of calling to figure out if you're in an outage, you can use this tool and see what's going on there. So I think it's going to be really popular with everyone to be able to track that information.
Doug, if I can, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
A week ago, at 3 o'clock in the morning, we had an automobile near my house that ran into a telephone pole and knocked out the power for about 600 customers. And I called in like we're supposed to, but then I went online and took a look, and I discovered this map, and it was handy because it confirmed the fact that, yeah, you already knew about the outage. It showed the number of customers that were impacted, and I got to say thank you very much for the. It was a telephone pole or a utility pole was taken out, and you guys had it back on relatively quickly considering what had to be done. So good, kudos, and I think this is a great addition for the public, and it's a great resource for them.
You're exactly right. When your power goes out, or maybe you're not even home and you're wondering whether your power is out, you can get onto the website and put in your information and see what's going on. So I want to just briefly kind of give an update on the integrated resource plan. It's what we call the IRP. It's a 20-year look. I've talked about this a little bit before at the budget hearing. So it's going to review all of our load forecasts, our resources. It's going to run different scenarios. It's going to look at high, low, what's expected, what those prices might be for like natural gas, energy, our load forecast. And it's basically going to provide recommendations for what the lowest cost options are to supply our customers with power moving forward. And with that might be, retiring units. That could be building maybe new generation. Maybe it's a gas turbine. It could be looking at maybe renewables. Whether they're more costly or not, that will show what those costs are estimated to be, and then we can kind of make a decision as as a city council and the mayor, what direction we want to take the utility at that point. So that's kind of what that's going to be about with the overall plan. So what we did though is we looked at several firms. Trying to come up with who we're going to get proposals from. And these three companies, the Bridal Group, Quanta Technology, and the Energy Authority, are basically the ones that were qualified and the ones that actually responded to us. There are some firms that didn't respond. There's some that said they're too busy. So we wanted at least three just to make sure that we, got the best deal available. The Energy Authority, we use them for other resources for, managing our sales of power and purchases of load. But they do have that capability, and they've done it for like Kansas City, Missouri. So you can see some of their work eventually once they post it. We're going to try to get, examples, of their work as well, making sure that it's all taken care of properly.
I'm sorry, but isn't to me, I would think that the Energy Authority would have a conflict of interest because they make money off the city of Springfield, and by giving them, if they were to be one of the, if they were to get this, how do we know that they are not doing things that's better for their company than what's better for the city of Springfield? And that's my concern.
Well,
I don't have anything against the Energy Authority, but the fact of the matter is they make a profit off the city of Springfield by selling our power. And by doing that, that puts them in a huge conflict of interest on this particular plan.
They're a monthly fee. So it doesn't matter how much we're selling, for power and how much we're buying. And then the fact is that, wherever we're buying it from, whether it's, from the grid or it's through our generation that we're selling, we still have to buy our load separately. That's the way MISO works. So we're supposed to have the same cost no matter what. So T's going to look at it, and they're going to produce a product that, from what I've seen, for what they did with Kansas City, they're going to produce a product that we can look at and see that, that they've made the right recommendations based upon the numbers. So they should have given us a product that's showing us what the cost of the generation is, for us, what the cost of new replacement generation is to build, what the cost is for buying replacement power. The only thing that these groups maybe can't do is do some engineering studies for if we're going to buy more power off the grid than we do right now, we might have to build transmission upgrades. We would have to do some studies on that to look at voltage stability and some other things. That's not really part of this, but we'd have to input that data for costs, sometime later this summer.
That would be one thing, corporate counsel, if you could look into that as far as a conflict of interest for the Energy Authority. I think that we want to really take a good hard look. I do think that we need to have someone that hasn't done business with us before, and the Energy Authority also, since they do business with us, it'd be better to get an independent group and get an idea. That's just my 2 cents.
Well, and it will come down to the cost too. And we'll have 3 proposals. If the Energy Authority, we can bring that to the council and let the council decide. If they're, let's just say, $200,000, and the other companies are $500,000, are we, to me, depending on what they have in their proposal, for the technical portions, that might be the better way to go.
Doug, real quick, a point of clarification to build upon Alderman Hanauer's question. So the Energy Authority is paid by the city on a flat rate per month. Could that potentially change that amount if the generation number goes down?
It's based upon the services provided. No, I don't think so. I mean, Greg, you can
just take a look at
any more of that on the generation side?
That fee is set up by the number of generators you have, or the amount of.
Come to the microphone, please.
Pardon me. That service fee that he charges, it's for various services. So it doesn't matter if we have 1 generator or 7 generators. It doesn't matter, how much load we have. It's for what services we're signing up. Service to put the load in the market, service to put generation in the market. And then the auxiliary services and settlements and all those kind of things. So, that service fee won't go down if we have fewer generators, and it doesn't go up. And it didn't go up, for example, when we added Unit 4 or anything like that.
Thank you.
Alderman.
Doug, there's been a great deal of interest in this integrative resource plan, and a great deal of interest in the economic analysis to know which of our 4 coal-fired plants are producing electricity at what economic cost, what expenses go for each unit of production of generation from each of our 4 units. So in relation to that, have we communicated to each of the 3 potential bidders for this work? Have we sent at this point a uniform request for proposal to each one of these 3 companies, the Brattle Group, the Quanta Technology Group, and the Energy Authority?
Yeah, basically we sent them a sheet basically listing out some of the, the items that we're requiring them to address in their proposals. So that way they're all basically providing the same information to us as much as possible.
Was that a uniform communication to each of the 3?
Yes. Yeah, it was the same communication that was sent to each 3 of them.
Okay. Could you make that available to Tim Griffin so that the alderman can take a look at that? And then a follow-up question. Earlier tonight, we talked about the green rates, which would be down the road. We would try to set electric rates based on time of day usage, so that if it's time of day during high demand peak or low demand peak, someone could either get charged up or charged down for their electric usage. Does this integrative resource plan touch on that? Future organization of our rates for the future? Does it discuss that at all?
It's going to be looking at what they expect for load overall. I mean, that's something they're going to be looking at, but our rates aren't going to change drastically the load forecast for the city. I mean, those rates are new rates. You know, what it's going to do is for our existing customers, will they be willing to shift their rates or their loads to take more advantage of the cost savings? We don't know that. Will we, you know, what level of new business will we attract? We don't know that yet. So to try to guess, you know, what that might be, we just really can't do that. So they're going to have to take a look at what's kind of happening across the country, across the you know, the region, and look at what makes sense for a forecast.
Let me rephrase the question then. You know, historically, Springfield has wanted enough generation capacity for our highest peak native load. Now, if we get heavy into this green rate orientation and we're encouraging people to run their dryers, their clothing dryers during low peak demand periods, theoretically, our highest peak generation native load will hopefully drop, and that may affect what degree of generation we need in the future. Am I explaining my question?
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. If we had a peak of like the peak of use rate, I guess for all customers, that could maybe change a little bit of the profile, but we're not proposing that yet.
Okay.
We're just taking our first dive into the industrial rate because we can see a real need for that. You know, I think there's a lot more discussion to have across the whole cities if there's enough citizens interested in peak of use rates, and it might require some upgrades to our meters as well.
Correct. But I think in the outlined IRP, there's demand side management stuff.
That's true. That's right. Yeah, you're right. So the integrated resource plan will look at demand side management as a part of that. So there is some looks into that, what kind of possibilities that there might be.
Will the integrated resource plan look at smart meters and the cost of smart meters and the implementation of smart meters, or is that also down the road for analysis purposes?
We just got done doing our current meters, right, Greg?
Right.
Last year.
I don't see the smart meters getting into the IRP necessarily. There's considerably a great level of detail. I could see that in phase 2 as part of it. But, you know, focus on the 20-year outlook and portfolio management stuff. It will probably be some demand side management, high level look at some time of use rates. I don't know how much it again is impressive right now.
You guys, if you're going to talk, you got to come to the mic, please.
So, yeah. So the demand side management is going to look at that. We're not going to be looking at the smart meters as a part of the IRP necessarily. So, again, we did have some smarter meters, but not what they call the smart meter. And so this is kind of a one step down, and we'd started that process, you know, much further back than a lot of the other utilities. And so it's a little bit more costly to try to then replace all these newer meters that we just got done doing with the newer version that would allow us to do the peak of rate use. That's something that's in the future, yes, but not necessarily right now.
Okay, final comment. I think if you provide to Tim Griffin the communication that we're sending to the potential bidders as far as the scope of what we're asking for, I think that'll allow us to know better what exactly we'll get from the IRP process.
Sure.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Any other questions? Thank you, Director. Any new business we need to discuss? We're going to move to citizens requesting to speak to the committee, but I'm going to refer to John Fennell. Do you want to come up and speak? Okay. So we're going to go to people who want to address the committee. The first one that we're going to talk to is Mr. Brad Scheibe.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Please state your name and address for the committee, please. Thank you.
Brad Shivey, 1615 North Turkson Parkway. This evening, thank you, first of all, council and committee. We came here this evening, many leaders of labor, to discuss a situation that has taken place in Springfield that I've never seen in 17 years as a business manager to this extent. So we're going to discuss today the Days Inn project on a piece of property owned and operated by City Water, Light and Power. There was, in this packet, you will see, first of all, you will see your bid sheet. Demolition project for 2017 for the Days Inn on Stevenson. If you look at that bid sheet, and I'll piece this together for you, much of this information came from FOIAs. Much of it was hard to come by, and also from a civil lawsuit that was filed by one of the workers on the project. The first bid sheet is the contractors who had bid. If you look, many of those are local, or some of those are local, and the low bidder is from Monticello. It came out in the lawsuit that the contractor was actually contacted by CWLP to come bid on this project. I find that strange that we talk about a 5% reduction in bids for a local economy, but then our own power plant is reaching out and bringing individuals from Monticello to do a demolition, that there are projects being done just like that by local contractors. Also, if you look at the bids on that sheet, you have bids of individuals like Valentine, Shirley, Dorr, Coleman. All of those projects, or all of those contractors have done projects in this community. If you look at the number and the low bid, we have almost a $300,000 difference in some of those bids. The low bidder being $219,000. Usually when you see a spread of a bid like this, it means that the individuals are not following prevailing wage, of which we're here this evening to identify exactly that. The next file that you have is a certified payroll. The certified payroll is how we identify, and the municipalities and other awarding agencies identify if the workers have been paid the appropriate wages. As you know, city, municipality monies, state monies trigger prevailing wage. That is a wage that is based off of the prevailing rate in that area. It is a misnomer that is a union rate. That is not factual. If the majority or the market share in that community is a reduced non-union rate, that becomes the rate. It would change. This rate is off of the prevailing rate in this locality. What I want you to see is if you look on that certified payroll, now I want to tell you, it's state law that the awarding agency, i.e. either the city or CWLP, monitors that these rules have been followed. If you look at that certified payroll, there's 3 individuals. 3. In the papers that follow in this file, there's 22 individuals who worked on this project. 22. All of these pictures are on City Water, Light and Power property. They're operating heavy equipment, they're doing demolition, they're doing all of the various jobs pertaining to demolition. When this came to our attention, we went to the job site and began filming and taking pictures of individuals on the site. While we were there, we noticed that there were individuals who had set up a swap meet on City Water, Light and Power property. So they were taking all of the chairs and desks and TVs and selling it for cash on the property, inside the fence. We have pictures in your packet of that being taken place. When we had a meeting with the city and City Water, Light and Power officials, they told us it wasn't happening. So we brought the picture for you. They were taking all of these various pieces of furniture and various other things from this job site and selling them. When we brought it to the city's attention, they moved that operation with all of that equipment that they took to a street, small street right off of Cook Street, where they set up the same operation and sold the same stuff for cash. When we spoke to the CWLP representatives, they told us in front of Chief Legal Counsel and the mayor of the city of Springfield that they had a salvage contract to do so. Well, that was a blatant lie. There is no salvage contract. The collective or the contract states that they will attempt to recycle. We spoke, I'll refer you back to the first couple pages, to all of the other contractors on this bid list, including today. None of them were told anything about a salvage contract to sell things for cash. They were told to recycle. Recycle would be taking things like steel or aluminum or different things, not selling furniture on city property for cash. So here's what we did. We found a employee or a few employees who worked on the job. Brought them in, had them do depositions with our legal counsel, go on the record and talk about what was taking place. And then we began to monitor the job and monitor these individuals. As it turns out, he was paid for 12 hours of demolition on city property, 12 hours of demolition on a project let and owned and operated by City Water, Light and Power, $50 cash at the end of a 12-hour day. We have the video of him being there for 12 hours, $50 cash. But he was told he could also take some of the furniture and some of the lamps in lieu of cash. Pretty gracious, isn't it? We began to talk to other people that worked on the project, and it turns out that the contractor had gone and cut a deal with a local individual who's paid by state and federal subsidies to own and operate a halfway house. These individuals who were on this project predominantly were from that halfway house. So we began to speak to them about the pay they were getting. Same. Cash, which I'd like to remind you, which you all know, is tax fraud. So it's not only tax fraud, it's a violation of prevailing wage. In the meeting that we had with CWLP officials, we explained the various things that were taking place. In that meeting, we talked about the demolition that was taking place. We were told there was no demolition. So we showed the pictures of the demolition that we filmed that morning. Demolition was taking place. Consequently, when we did the FOIA, we found out, and actually we had our organizer go to the city and look for it, there was no demolition permit. But they had already been doing demolition. You know, here's the situation. We have 22 individuals on a project that are not union members. They're working individuals who deserve the pay that they earned. It's very simple. This is not an issue about recouping union funds. This is about protecting people who worked on a job, and there's laws that provide for that protection, and it has been set aside. Just recently, this was turned to the Inspector General to look into. Well, we already have on file a lawsuit that we had filed and on behalf of one of the employees. We had to drop that lawsuit because it came to our attention that he had decided to take a severe step in his life that would no longer put him on this earth. We have not found that that is either factual or if he's reverted back to the life that put him in incarceration. So to follow the law, we have to have an individual that worked on the job to represent him. It's a strange law. So we can't sue as taxpayers. We have to have standing. So we have to find a person who worked on the job, which we're working on now. But the fact is this. If the certified payroll shows 3 people, okay? The new certified payroll we just received yesterday has another 3, so 6. There's 22 here. Pretty simple, isn't it? Pretty simple. The problem is that it is not being dealt with. And I feel like it's becoming a standard. You know, we dealt with this on the Rick Lawrence project, downtown Springfield, the non-payment of prevailing wage. And I think that it is a failing of the city to not protect those that need protection. We have a representative here from Kavanaugh and Hare who was part of the lawsuit and wants to talk to you about responsibilities. But I will tell you this, I appreciate the opportunity to come here this evening to talk about this, and I hope that this information would stir someone to action to protect those individuals, because it literally disgusts me that people who just got out of being incarcerated get on a project that's owned and operated by this city and are paid $50 cash. And that's not rumor, that's in signed depositions. $50 cash. Now, you know, maybe that doesn't bother some people, but I think it's not only, it's just morally wrong that someone doesn't do something about that. So if you could, just one moment.
Mr. Chair, can we pose questions to Mr. Sharvey?
Well, I'll come right back up. I just wanted to tell you a few things. Is that all right, Alderman?
Thank you for letting me address the committee. My name is Jake Blickan. I'm an attorney at Kavanaugh and O'Hara. Excuse me?
Last name, please.
Blickan, B-L-I-C-K-H-A-N. Our office is in Springfield, 2319 West Jefferson. And to echo with what Brad said, and to give you some perspective, the prevailing wage in this job was just in wages $28 an hour. So our former client, Mr. Fickus, was getting $50 a day. He should have been getting $28 an hour, and that doesn't even include his fringe benefit contributions. So the underpayment here is absolutely egregious. And the contract is between the city and the contractor. And the city has all the power here. I mean, it's your contract. It's yours to enforce. There's a specific provision in this contract that says if any part of the bid or the specifications aren't being followed, you have the right to terminate it. I've handled dozens of these prevailing wage cases, and in other municipalities and other places, you call and you send a letter saying, hey, we think we have a prevailing wage violation. There's no more disbursement of funds from the municipality. They hold on to that until it gets investigated, until it gets cleared. And that's just not happening here. And it's encouraging and it's promoting this chicanery by contractors who are flouting the law. They're coming into Springfield. They're taking jobs from contractors who are doing things right, doing things the way they're supposed to, and they're grossly underpaying these employees who, like my client in this previous case, is unsophisticated towards the law and is not represented by a labor union. He doesn't know his rights. The notice that's required to be posted wasn't posted. So, you know, he was just trying to make a few bucks and had no idea as to how underpaid and how poorly treated he was. And it's really, the city needs to take some steps here to enforce its contracts, to make sure. There's been a lot of promoting of residency and encouraging residents to get these jobs. And when it comes time for them to get paid the wage, the city's saying, well, you know, that's not really our problem. Take it to the Department of Labor, take it to the Inspector General. So it's really a travesty, and these contracts have these provisions that need to be enforced to level the playing field and make sure that city residents are being paid what they're supposed to be paid. I'd be happy to take any questions if anybody has any.
Alderman Minimum, you had a question?
Thank you. Clearly, we've got to enforce our rules, and once we become aware of violations and make sure that we require performance consistent with our city code and so forth. I do have a question about the documents. I noticed that the photos cover about a 5-month period from January 3 through May 17, and we have 2 payroll sheets covering 2 weeks of the roughly 20 weeks for that time period of the photos. Does the city have the other time sheets?
Those wage sheets came to us from a FOIA to the city.
So does the city then have the other wage sheets?
Well, what I'd say, Alderman, is I look forward to you finding those also.
Well, did you receive the other
No,
wage
we
sheets?
did not. That's all we've received. And the situation is that it is hard to generate something that doesn't exist. Because as you see by those sheets, it should show hours. Not only that, but what class of work did you perform? And it's lacking on there.
So a host of issues are being discussed here, and
Yes,
I'm
sir.
sure that our city personnel will want to look into this further, and I hope they do. But so my question, and if it can't be answered now, I understand, but does the city have some, roughly 20 weeks of wage sheets in our possession?
First, I'd like to know, is the suit in place? Has it actually been dropped?
It had to be dropped because no standing.
But I'm not, it's still showing as being active.
The paperwork's active. Judge Schmidt
It has not been dismissed yet?
not as of yet. Judge Schmidt was the presiding judge, and as the council may be aware, he passed away. So we are in the process of having it dismissed, though. Yes.
Okay, I was.
But
not
the
aware of
letters have
that.
been put forward.
Right. No, there's. I would just tell you, there's substantial documentation, and it has been in the process of being reviewed, actually, as a result of the case that's been filed. And there's been quite a bit of discussion with both Iron Horse and their attorney, who's from St. Louis. And so we are gathering information. I'm not aware that there were any depositions in this case. I was told there was basically no discovery.
Well, we have testimony from our client.
No, I mean, I'm using a term of art for the attorney.
Right.
Were there depositions?
Not in the sense of discovery, no. But
Okay,
there was.
because if you have those, that would be good to have.
No, there were just testimony that our office elicited from Mr.
Like a statement?
Yes.
Okay, if we could get a copy of that, that would be helpful.
Alderman Senor.
Technically, since the suit hadn't been dismissed, should we even be discussing it? Because, Mr. Zirkle, I mean, technically, I know it's
Well,
a technicality.
I mean, I'll take you at your word. I was not aware of that
It's
until you
released.
just said it.
It's
And-
released.
I'm sorry?
It's released. We had to drop it because we lost standing once the individual
I understand, but
disappeared.
Yes.
there was an amended complaint filed, I think, in November?
That's correct.
Okay.
It's in the process of being dismissed.
All right.
So technically, is it, I mean, I don't want to be under some type of legality, because if it's still active, should we even be discussing it at this point, since you don't have any documentation in your hand saying that the suit is dismissed?
Well,
Alderman, we filed it, and I'm telling you, we dropped it.
I
We
understand,
filed the
Mr.
lawsuit.
Scheibe, but I'm trying to protect myself up here as making a comment. I don't want to get called into court for some question that I asked while some suit was still live. So I'm just trying to make sure that I'm.
If we could get copies of whatever statements you have, because I haven't seen those.
Sure.
And I don't think I was told when this issue, Mr. Ron in my office is actually the one working on this. And so I had been told that there had not been actual formal discovery in the case.
Iron Horse issued discovery to
Okay. I meant
my client.
from the plaintiff.
Correct.
Okay. So if you have some, did you supply that to Iron Horse, the statements?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Corporation Counsel, can we discuss this?
I would like to get whatever information you have, if it's in the form of like sworn statements.
Yes.
Okay. And then I'd be happy to talk about it.
Yes or no?
Well, you have me at I haven't seen all the materials, so if I could see it, I'd be happy to talk about it.
But we can give information this evening,
Yeah.
correct?
Well, I mean, tomorrow
Yeah, I
or
understand.
email.
I understand.
Yeah.
Checking. Alderman DeSenza.
Has this company been paid in full?
It is my understanding that they have been paid.
Did we vote on that?
That was my question. What ordinance? Because there was one, and if I may, Mr. Chair.
Go.
We had one ordinance that was held in committee.
Because of this issue.
It was held in committee. It
Right.
was not paid. So if this company got paid, who authorized it? And that means it's gone around the procurement process. That's my question, because they should not have gotten one dime yet from the city because we didn't vote on it.
Well, here, Doug will address it. Right.
So, there's two different issues here. The supplemental appropriation's a different issue than the contract and then the agreement through city purchasing. I'm not the city purchasing agent, but I know I've done enough contracts through the years. The agreement with Iron Horse, that was basically authorizing, the city council approved that authorized to pay them for the $219,000. No, hang on. The supplemental appropriation, that work, as it was occurring, the way I understand it, was basically an FY17. Some of that work went into FY18. We didn't have the funds necessarily. We didn't know for sure. When the bill came in May, maybe, I think, of last year, that's the way I understand it, we had to then figure out what we were going to do. The person that was handling that work retired at the end of May. So new people had to take that over. And then by the time they did that, then they got to later summer, early fall. And then they decided to work with finance to say, okay, we need a supplemental appropriation. They weren't for sure if the funds and the accounting strings were there enough, because those accounting strings have other projects in them, other work. So it has road repairs and.
Okay, here's my problem. All right. It's going around. What this boils down to, Doug, is it's going around the procurement process. You're shuffling. You're doing a card deal here. It's going around the procurement process, and I'm going to tell you right now, this has got to stop. That's $200,000 that somehow got paid that I certainly don't remember voting on, saying this company's getting paid for that.
We're not going around procurement processes. So I got to stick up for the staff. We're not going around procurement processes. The agreement, the contracts were approved, just like anything else we've ever done.
Show me the ordinance that we voted to give this.
It's a contract for $219,000. You have to approve that.
Yeah.
We can produce the ordinance for you, and we will.
I want to see it because I don't remember it.
But so once that's approved, we have the authority to do that. Sometimes when projects do this, it'll bridge multiple fiscal years. If we can get it done within a certain fiscal year, it's easier. If it extends over and they didn't budget for it, starting back in the prior fall, that's when they're okay, the work went over. Now we're going to either have enough money in those accounting strings or not, because there's other funds that are there that we have to, be concerned with. So we have enough to pay for, road work, or maybe it's another contract, whatever it is. But some of that stuff didn't occur. There wasn't a need for all the road repairs. So those funds had enough money by the end of this last fiscal. We no longer need that supplemental appropriation. It doesn't have anything to do with with the money that's awarded to the contractor for the spending. So those are two different completely issues. So the issue that's being discussed by everyone else is kind of a separate issue on the prevailing wage thing than what the supplemental appropriation is. It has nothing to do with the contract itself. It has to do with the accounting strings and
I would like to see the ordinance number that we voted on to pay this company.
Sure, we can do that.
Alderman Senor.
Doug, I think you talked about a totally different issue than what's being raised here. But Mr. Zirkle, if I may, was there ever any information brought to you that would raise question as to concerns that was going on at the Stevenson Inn site?
Without a doubt, there was complaints made, and there was reviews made at that time. But we need to discuss those things, I think, in an executive session context, because the mayor was advised. The mayor was advised on the review by staff, by the purchasing staff and so on, by the utility staff, having looked through all the materials. So,
follow-up question: was any of that information passed on to anyone up here that would have now that would have made where concerns would have been raised by one of us about that project?
I'm not aware of that. In other words, at the time, when the ordinance came up about the supplemental, it was held in committee because of this issue.
So was this, and that was just, excuse me if I may.
I mean, there was a question about the status
So
of it.
we were only
Right.
talking about payment for services rendered at that time, is that correct?
That is correct.
So we would not have had any knowledge of anything else that was occurring on that site, is that correct?
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, yes, that's
That's why I want
correct.
to make for sure that,
Yeah.
that and so.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No problem.
And what'll end up happening with the suit, I was not aware until you just indicated about the dismissal, because what would ultimately end up happening is all the information be gathered, it'd be presented to a judge. Judge would make a determination, very straightforward. So there's a 3-year statute of limitations with a prevailing wage violation. The Illinois Department of Labor has an enforcement process. It includes criminal penalties, it includes fines, all sorts of different activities, and they're mandated to enforce that. So from our perspective, if the case were going forward, then at some point it would be in front of a judge. A judge would decide, yes, there was a violation, or no, there wasn't. So I was not aware till just now that the thought was to, because of circumstances, not be able to pursue.
Follow up question. If that was the case, Mr. Zerker, would the city be able to recoup any damages from the company that performed the work? If facetiously something happened that
depends on all of the evidence that might be available.
So Corporation Counsel, if we were in violation of the pay,
well, it wouldn't be. It's not the city; it's the contractor.
But prevailing wage, every contractor that works for the city, they have to be paying prevailing wage.
Yes.
And were we monitoring that?
I'm afraid I would have to.
I know you. I'm not saying were you monitoring it. I said were we monitoring that? If we were, we were in violation of the Prevailing Wage Act. Correct?
I would have to defer to the department.
Doug, the question is, was the utility aware that we were not following the Prevailing Wage Act?
No. I mean, as far as my knowledge, I've had no meetings on this with anyone, except for some questions with city's purchasing agent, as well as Corporation Counsel. So if, I don't know for sure, what happened that many years ago. Was it, what was it?
It was 17.
17?
Right.
Well, part of it was last year, but so with that, I've had no discussions with anyone as far as that goes, and the person that's in charge of that I can't ask right now anyway, because he's retired.
Any other questions?
I just want to make a point. So these people that were working on this project were being paid $8 an hour or $50 a day in cash. Is that correct?
Yeah. So yes and no. They were even paid even less than that. And what I was going to say, Alderman, to your questions, here's the problem. And yes, people and staff from City Water, Light, and Power were in these meetings and knew. Ted was in it. Sandy Robinson was in it. We explained the things were taking place. From that day forward, nothing was done. We were there. We were told they weren't selling things on site. They were. We were told they weren't doing demolition. They were. Then I even brought up in that meeting that there was 12 individuals on a roof, no hard hats, tennis shoes, no tie off, and someone's going to get killed. You know what I was told in that meeting by that individual? It's not our responsibility. He has insurance. Something happens on him. That is exactly what you said.
Let's just keep it up here, please.
It's exactly what you said. You can say whatever you want here, but that's a fact. And just like they're not selling equipment, they're not doing all these different things, it is exactly what happened. And we had to do it. Then we had to FOIA. And to this day, how do you not see the project with 22 people working on it and then see the certified payroll with 3? I think that might have maybe came up in a conversation. But they had extensive conversations about how to pay. But they haven't had any conversations at all about this. And then you see this was tabled. It never got to anybody. Why would it be tabled if we're asking for it to be paid? But what I want to say, Alderman, is here's the worst thing. is when we sue on behalf of a member or on behalf of an individual who's not even a member, we incur cost. So why would we pay our members' monies to enforce a law that should be enforced by the city? So we pay thousands of dollars to enforce something that City Water, Light, and Power could choose to enforce. And you know, and then I hear people talk about the Department of Labor. We know the temperature of the Department of Labor right now. I've not heard of a case adjudicated under this administration. Soon that'll change, and I look forward to it. But right now, and the law and your own contract says that you can adjudicate this with the information you have. You could take back the money. It's clear breach of contract. You know, when we were filming the job, they busted pipes, and then they had crews for 3 days from City Water, Light, and Power out there fixing them. Did they pay anything for that? You know, it's just a lot of questions. And it seems like if we don't continue to come here, which we will continue to do to raise it, it's just going to go quietly into the night. And I don't think the individuals that worked on that job deserve that. So,
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
It's from the pictures I see here, this demolition began roughly 14 months ago. And I just want to ask if any alderman here received a communication from Mr. Shivey at any point in time during those 14 months that this was a problem. Did Alderman Redpath, did you receive, it's in your ward, did you receive a
I watched the demolition and when I drive by there every day, but that's about it.
Okay.
we predominantly went to the city and City Water, Light, and Power.
Corporation Counsel, do you have something you wanted to?
No, I was just going to say, in fairness with your counsel here, my memory is, and I could be mistaken, so correct me, it is my understanding that Iron Horse, who's the defendant in the suit, through their counsel filed basically an answer denying the allegations.
That's true. They have denied it, but we obviously vehemently disagree with that.
No, I understand that. I'm just trying to make sure that we're on the same page, because there was a pending suit where the parties were in complete opposition on what happened.
That's their position, and our position is what we presented to this council.
So, Corporation Counsel, is this in the Inspector General's office being reviewed? Do you know?
Actually, the mayor asked that we engage him to basically review the process. I was not aware again until today about the issue about the suit being dismissed. But that may cause us to take maybe a different tact if we're not going to be able to use the normal court process to get to the bottom of it.
I strongly encourage the Inspector General's office to undertake this, and I agree with the mayor that it needs to be looked at. There's obviously some serious allegations and violations that are taking place, and we really need to get to the bottom of this, because I don't recall, I'm sure we had a contract come in front of us, but you guys know how many contracts come in front of us. I don't recall voting to pay this contract. If it was paid, and I'm not saying Doug's not telling us the truth, I'm just saying I don't recall that if it was in a supplemental appropriation.
Here's the context of what's happened. There was the ordinance approving the original contract bid. That's what I think Doug was making reference to. And then subsequent to that, in, I think, October of last year, there then was a supplemental appropriation presented in order to have additional monies identified to complete the payment. That's what the supplemental ordinance.
It was strictly for the accounting purposes, so that way by the end of the fiscal, we would not run out of money in those accounting strings.
Right. And it was that supplemental to pay the last half. I can't remember now the exact amount. It was.
And I don't have the information with me to tell you when it was paid.
Yeah, it was tabled. I think like last October, early November, but it was
Still on the calendar.
I'm sorry.
It's 2017-476 is the ordinance number. And it says to pay it's for $115,750 to pay for the demolition of the Days Inn. That's still on the agenda? It's still tabled.
Correct.
I guess we can take it off the tabled ordinances now.
So just a point of clarification for everyone. You know, when we get contracts that come in front of us, we obviously believe that the contracts are bid to the lowest bidder, that they're following the rules of the contracts, that prevailing wage is going to be paid. We get into this situation where we get down the line, and I take Doug's word for it that they didn't realize that things weren't being, the prevailing wage wasn't being paid. But now we got allegations that said that's not accurate. So we need to get to the bottom of this. And the only person that can get to the bottom of it is the Inspector General. And we need to have them thoroughly look into this. And I know you are on top of that, Mayor, and I appreciate that. So we need to get to the bottom of this and find out if the violations warrant any kind of further legal action by the city in addition to this contractor. Anybody got anything else to say on that?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
We can always bar that contractor from further work, and based on what we find.
Well, bank on it, because I'm not voting for one of these again. I can tell you, it's always been a policy of most of the city council is to go local whenever we can. So when a contractor comes from outside the city and we see him, it sends up a red flag to me. I'm thinking, why can't we give this to somebody who works in Springfield?
Well,
yes.
We did just that last summer when we had the concrete guy that was here.
Right.
That had the contract previous years, and we just barred him, or we didn't award him the contract because he wasn't from Springfield.
Right.
We gave it to a Springfield contractor. So that's another thing that I see is way out of whack with this particular instance here.
So the bottom line is that we need to get to the bottom of this. I hope that Corporation Council, you and the mayor will pursue that with the Inspector General to get some answers, and so we can put this thing to rest and get to the bottom of this thing. Mr. Shivey, thank you for coming. Thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Donlin?
I guess I just want to, it's more.
Alderman Donlin, sorry.
That's all right. More of a process question. When there is a allegation of not following the rules, such as prevailing wage, and we all know there was let's assume that we all know there was a contract that we authorized for this work to be done. Is there a mechanism within the city to stop the payment? I get what Doug was saying about we authorized it before. They came back. They were coming with a supplemental appropriation. They were able to live within the budgetary authority they had and get it paid. But it seems odd to me that potentially there was payment here when there was a violation. And I guess what I'm looking at, I just want to know what the process is, and in the future, if there's an allegation, if that can be communicated to everybody so that it's very clear that we're trying to resolve an issue. What's the process, Corporation Council?
These happen very rarely, and in this case, I think the thought was that when the ordinance was tabled, that actually stopped the payment, but the amounts, apparently the supplemental was no longer necessary.
Right.
So, but what will need to happen is we just need to get to the bottom of it, and at the time, there was a review done, and information was provided that indicated it was not a problem. And so if there's additional information or sworn statements and stuff, that would be helpful to get.
I just don't, and I'm sure everybody agrees, I just don't want us to get jammed up if something like this comes up again. It should be clear that things are on hold until it gets, I guess, your office's blessing.
Yeah.
Very clearly. Thank you.
Just to follow up too, before the supplemental was actually filed, I think the invoice was already even paid. So, I mean, the reason the supplemental was done is to get more money into the funds to make sure we have enough for the end of the fiscal year to pay for everything else that's needed in that. Again, it was just the work. As far as I'm concerned, it was completed, not knowing these other issues. So, just in that sense. The supplemental appropriation ordinance had nothing to do with paying the contractor. So that was already done. Does that make sense?
The contractor's already been paid?
Yeah.
That was my question.
Yeah.
So and I know you don't have it in front of you, but so the ordinance that was brought forward in the summary, did it say supplemental appropriation for the Days Inn project? Do you recall?
I think it was supplemental to pay, and maybe it was poor choice of wording. Yeah, it's an ordinance authorizing a supplemental appropriation in the amount of $115,000 for the former Days Inn demolition site of the Office of Public Utilities. That's just the summary portion. I don't have the full ordinance.
I guess what I'm asking, I guess if it had already been paid, why did it say that?
Well, again, it's a supplemental appropriation, so with fiscal terms, that's the appropriate language to use to basically increase funding in an accounting line. So we have to do a supplemental appropriation, and we're just given the reason why is that it was because of this project, and it was because it bridged over two different fiscals.
But you can't pay anything if you don't have the budgetary authority. So you're saying the budgetary authority was there, you paid it, this could have been worded differently. I mean.
Right, it's a supplemental appropriation to increase the accounting strings. That's essentially what it is. And the reason it was done was because that project went over two different fiscals.
I hear what you're saying, but you might have to draw it out for me, so that's.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. We'll move to the next person on our list to speak, Mr. Donald Hanrahan.
Don Hanrahan, 1119 South 6th, Springfield. I wanted to address the integrated resource plan. I don't want the integrated resource plan to be something that kicks things down the road. And we're talking kind of out of both sides of our mouths. For example, we're talking about using the integrated resource plan to determine, are we going to retire units 31 and 32? But when we talk to the Army Corps of Engineers, we're telling them we're going to run those plants until 2029 or something like that. I got that in a Freedom of Information Act request. That's what they're telling the feds. There's all kinds of bond issues that are facing CWLP. I heard at the January budget meeting $40 to $60 million for replacing service lines over the next 10 to 15 years. A watershed study done last year shows it's going to cost $140 million to assure phosphorus containment in the Lake Springfield watershed to prevent the kind of algal blooms that shut down water service for major cities in Ohio a couple years ago. Phosphorus is a dangerous thing coming into our lake. We have to do something to stop it. City Water, Light and Power is spending $500,000 a year, something like that. So 280 years from now, we might get it done at that rate. That's a big problem. It's going to have to be addressed. Dredging. The lake is 82 years old. It has never been completely dredged. It had a small part of it dredged in the late 80s, early 90s, and it's lost at least 20% of its capacity. All the sludge that was taken out 25 years ago is back in the lake again. So that's another $100 million. And it's not something that you can just let the lake fill up with mud and build a new one. That's sort of what the plan is, but that isn't right. It's not right morally. It's not right economically. It's not right for the city of Springfield. Our lake needs to be maintained. Millions more in liabilities to clean up the ash pits that are unlined and also ancient, leaching into the groundwater. Just saying, well, let's wait and make sure maybe the EPA is going to not let us just keep on polluting. You know, that's not an answer for the people of Springfield. Hunter Dam, we were told $108 million, but now I know from the FOIA documents I've gotten, they've shrunk the size. They have to build 2 more dams to impede phosphorus from coming into that lake. It's going to cost more. I don't know. I can't tell from the documentation what the projections are. But who's going to pay? The ratepayers. That's who's going to pay. And I hear all this stuff about rate restructuring, and it's all about pleasing investors and Moody's and making them happy. What about the ratepayers? That's who we should be thinking of. The priority should be to preserve and protect Lake Springfield, to restore its capacity. I'd also like to know, 3 years ago, this goes to some of the things that Alderman Hanauer was saying. 3 years ago, Synapse Energy prepared a report stating that operation of units 31 and 32 is actually costing the city money over 5 years compared to buying off the grid. And I guess, you know, if you guys disagree with that, can you release some kind of an expert analysis that says it's wrong and that refutes the detailed documentation that was done in connection with that study? And if so, when can we expect it? 10 years from now? This integrated resource plan is something that's very good, but it needs to be done soon. Those same units, 31 and 32, use almost 8 million gallons of raw water per day. That's for flushing ashes and for induced evaporation, because it heats the water, it evaporates more quickly. And the Illinois State Water Survey says 5.4 million gallons for flushing, 2.3 for evaporation. The total, I noticed, total retail and wholesale water sales last year averaged 16 million gallons a day. Those things are huge water hogs. So if they use so much raw water, why not just stop the losses, stop the water waste, and either buy off the grid or do something else? But that amount of raw water, if we don't need it anymore, and we're not using 31 and 32, guess what? We don't need Hunter Lake. Thank you.
Thank you. Beverly Bunch.
Good evening. I'm Beverly Bunch, 871 South English, a proud resident of District 6. It's my pleasure to talk to you tonight, and kudos for developing an initiative to do the long-range integrated plan. Obviously, that's very important to our community. What I haven't heard much about, though, is the role of the public in public participation in that process. I think we need to build a sense of community in Springfield, and getting the public more engaged is an important step. And I'm not talking about just informing or lecturing the public or even just educating them. That's important, but I'm talking about discussing and hearing views and perspectives. I want to share with you an article that I read in the Government Finance Officers Association Government Finance Review, and it's called Building Confidence in Lincoln, Nebraska. Anybody ever been to Lincoln? Great. I haven't been there, but after reading the article, I want to go there. It's got a population of about 280,000. They'd been experiencing major problems with deficits, lack of public confidence, decreasing sales tax, and a property tax levy hadn't been increased in 14 years. Sounds a little familiar. And so rather than keep being frustrated and getting resistance from their public, they engaged in a process that's outlined in a book called The Price of Government. And this is a book that's been around for about 15, 20 years. And what it says governments need to do is engage the public and identify outcomes and results that matter to the public. And to be quite frank, one of my saddest days in the city council was listening to the discussion of tanning beds. I don't know if you guys remember that. It was brought to the medical profession, brought it to your attention that 8 kids under 18-year-olds were getting tanning beds, and they asked you to make that not possible. And the discussion focused on what does that mean to economic development. It did not focus on what does it mean. I was here as a mother. I was here because our dermatologist asked me to come because she was worried about the health of our young residents. And so I ask you to do what the city of Lincoln did. Engage in asking the community about priorities. Clearly, the community wants low rates, they want dependable energy, but I think they also want health. When we hear about coal ash problems, or when we hear about the number of kids in our school district having asthma problems, I don't know if you read the stats last week, 37% higher than the national average. So the question is there more our city can do in terms of preserving the environment? And the Girl Scouts were here not too long ago, the youngest members of our society. They've got some goals about sustainability and conserving natural resources. So I encourage you to reach out to a broad audience the way Lincoln, Nebraska did, and not to phrase decisions, do we want high rates or low rates? Instead, help educate the public on what are the risks of relying continually on coal and old generators, and are they willing to pay something to get rid of things such as coal ash problems that could contaminate our water. And my vote of confidence is in the public and you as your elected officials to really make this into a municipal public utility. It's more than just an engineering exercise on how to get the lowest rates. Thank you.
Thank you. Jane McBride.
Jane McBride, 3300 Forsyth. And I want to kind of build on some of the things that were just said there. This format of this committee is not the most conducive to getting that public participation that we were looking for. This option grew out of some of the interest, the strong public interest in the utility, and those were public meetings, public hearings, where there was some more exchange, where we could answer questions, we could bring up topics, and there could be some back and forth. This makes that a little bit more difficult. Also, we have no control of the agenda. I was, to be honest, very disappointed with the agenda. No offense to our fearless leaders here, but these issues that have been come up repeatedly should have been on the agenda. Rates that we knew nothing about and had no background on and could not comment on, but we're very interested in, all of a sudden appeared on the agenda. And we had a search and search to try to figure out what that was all about, looking to tomorrow night's ordinances to get the information on at least one recommended agenda. I'm very interested in green rates. Those can mean a myriad of things. It's not just off-peak. It could be, those are structured a vast amount of different ways. So before we talk about that in this meeting, I'd like to understand what the city means by that, and we'd like to have some back and forth. Public input is incredibly important. Alderman McMenon asked for the request for proposals for the plan, and he asked that that be delivered to Mr. Griffith. I'd like that delivered to the public, because I'd like to know what that RF, the request for proposals, entailed. And I'd like to know if there was any mention of public participation. What may come of that integrated resource plan may be some very difficult decisions for the city to make. I think we see that coming. And so the way to get the public engaged in that and to understand those and maybe get some buy-in as to what needs to be done is to involve them from the get-go. Get that information out and then have regular meetings, let those consultants talk to the public, get that out ahead of time, and give the public forums to talk about it, to talk to the consultants, to talk to the aldermen, to talk about the overall. The other thing that was mentioned was Alderman Hanauer mentioned that we still don't have, after 3 years, the cost of our product. That gets back to the Synapse report mentioned by Don Hanrahan. Burns and McDonald report, it was due in December. Where is it? Did you spend some money on it? Where is it? We've been doing this for 5 years. Years ago, you were told to shut down those units because they needed to be retired. They are now 50 to 60 years old. Way outdated, way outdated. You're spending money to get them up to date. Your rate structure is in danger because of those units, because of what you might have to pay to keep those things going. The other thing that has come up is, again, the very, and what, Doug said it in the workshops, flat if not decreasing, water consumption rates. I don't think anybody missed that Rochester, end of February, is talking about not buying water from the city any longer. That's not helping your consumption rate. You just heard that your units that you were told to retire 5 years ago, 8 million gallons a day of raw water. These are the issues that need to be on your agenda. This is what the public cares about. They care about the rates. They'd sure like to understand them before they come on the forum. But these are some of the very crucial issues before this committee of a whole that you've decided on. Coal ash compliance, that's another one. I don't like living in or being the subject of a municipal utility that's out of compliance or has a major coal ash problem. I don't care if you're sued about it. You have been sued about it. But I want to know from the utility, it should be on the agenda, what is happening. We heard in the budget meeting that, you're talking about a silo, you're talking about all these coal ash. What is the progress toward that? That should be on the agenda here. So what is it going to take? How can we be a part of what is going to be on the agenda for this less than ideal format to have this exchange with the public? The other one I'd like to know about is the Pawnee project. Where's that sit? Is that still on the table? Are we still talking about that? So that I'd like that to be on the agenda as well. So if we could please get these topics on the agenda and have something ahead of time. We all had to look and try to find even the meeting notice. It wasn't where it was supposed to be. Then we had to look and find and figure out how to sign up to speak. If we could work out that process as well, that would be incredibly helpful. But I think we have some very, very major issues that are not showing up on this agenda, and I would ask that be taken under consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Elizabeth Scafford.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
I'd just like to respond to really the three speakers so far. I share the views. I think there's a common thread being expressed here that the public participation is real important, and I think it is a good idea to share the request for proposal regarding the integrated resource plan with the public. There'll be two opportunities there for the public to get involved with that. First, by looking at the request for proposal, and then second, when the contract comes to the City Council, there'll be another opportunity to review what actually our utility is asking for from the providers. I also think that there's some good comments are being made about the composition of the agenda. I think we as aldermen, we want to get the proposed agenda out earlier in time so that there's more than what we got. I think it was put out on Friday, so the public has more of a chance to prepare themselves for the agenda. And then I think Chuck, we probably also need as a group of aldermen to have a 12-month plan of addressing all the subjects that are out there that the public wants to discuss. We can't all do it on one night, but if we communicate to the public that we will eventually get to some of these other topics that are of interest, then we will be, I think, responding to the public participation.
Thank you. I'll consider that.
Can I make a statement? Alderman, I share your concerns, but I think the mayor's done more, and he's had ward meetings. Whoever wants to speak can come attend the ward meetings. I understand Ms. McBride's concerns, but if we take and set aside everything that everyone has a concern on, how much more are we going to have to deal with? I mean, I understand CWLP and the power plant is important, and people have concerns about what's going on there, but if we to allow things to progress any further, when are we going to have time to deal with the regular business that we have to deal with? Again, I go back to the ward meetings that the mayor's had. He's had one every year for every ward. If you want to comment, you're more than welcome to come there and comment. He doesn't cut anyone off, and everyone gets to comment. So I disagree with some of the things that have been brought up because everyone has had ample opportunity to make any comments in the forums, and he especially had two that I know about it in Ward 1 for CWLP alone. So I kind of disagree with some of the comments that have been made so far.
Okay, thank you. Elizabeth?
Yeah, I think, James, you want to come with me or are you waiting? Good evening. First, thanks for having this meeting. I have a few questions just about how it was advertised and how the city let folks know that this was happening.
Well, we've been talking about it for months, and it's on the agenda. We posted it last week. And
last week, too.
We followed the rules.
So I'll just point out, it doesn't seem like just talking about it in this room is enough as far as letting the public know. Not everyone can watch city council. I love telling people what's going on, but I know if I'm the only one doing it, that's a problem. And so I think for me, it's a little bit disappointing. I know that the city has an email blast that goes out to folks that sit on the neighborhood associations. I'd love to see information on this included on that, and there to be a sign-up list for anyone that lives in the city to be getting those notifications about what's happening in the city, because I think it's hard to find information on the city's website. And it's hard, to find information. I kept asking when this meeting was going to be, and finally heard, but it was after quite a long time of discussing that this meeting was happening. I think you all voted on this in November, and it was about a month ago, if I'm right, that the date was announced. So I think, no offense, but you all could do a better job about getting the word out. What do you want to say?
It was on the neighborhood association.
Yeah, it was on, because we get it too, and it was under CWLP, Public Utilities Committee. That's
right.
correct.
And my point to that is that you have to be, my understanding is that a regular resident can't sign up to be on that list. You have to be the head of a neighborhood association.
No, incorrect.
If I can, address the speaker. If 30 days notice isn't enough, what do you want it to be?
Well, and I'm not saying like notice in this room. I think my question is, right, how are you getting it out to the broader public? Whether that's it's going out in a press release, I think the city can do a better job of communicating with the public is what I'm trying to say.
I think, Elizabeth, as you said in this room before, that when you brought things like that up to the administration, they've responded accordingly.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's duly noted. The mayor's sitting behind you. You kind of got me riled up a little bit when you said you learned about it a month ahead of time, and that wasn't enough time. So I just want to be extremely clear here. I mean, is that enough, or do you want it to be more, or what can we do differently?
Elizabeth is a resident of my ward, and so I had communicated that to her directly because she had asked. So, but not everyone reaches out to their alderman.
Right.
Some people reach out to their alderman daily, not you, Elizabeth. But, it just depends on the general public.
Well, I mean, if I can, I hear your point. We need to, and I agree, we need to make sure that when we have a meeting like this, that we broadcast it to the world. But I just don't, the mayor, I think, he announced it publicly. He actually singled you out in a jovial way at the meeting, and if we need to do something differently, just let us know. I think what we can do is, as individual aldermen, we could put it out on our web pages, Facebook, probably do more, and it's something I'll strive for at least. So,
yeah, and that's all we're asking you to do, because if we don't attend these meetings, we don't hear about that.
Right.
Everybody doesn't attend it like myself and like her. So everybody doesn't have access to computers either. There's a lot of people who don't have computers, so who might want to attend these meetings. So even though you think you've done enough, we need you to do more, and that's all she's asking. And I'll take this opportunity to say thank you to the mayor for having this meeting, because we've been asking for these meetings a long time. I don't know how many years it's been now, but now we're starting to get them.
I just want to help, James. And
I appreciate that, Jim. And we want to help you, because we speak on behalf. I speak on behalf of some people. So everybody can't make these meetings. But what I do is I take this information and I go back to the meetings that I attend, and I share this information. So we want to work with you, and we need this. And I piggyback and ditto the last three speakers on what they're saying. There's no public process as far as asking us how we feel. I know if I asked Doug last year about some numbers from our last meeting, on our outages, You know, I think one of the aldermen even asked, well, what's the future plan? But you won't even know the future plan unless you can look back and see what you've done in the past. And I still, Doug, don't know the numbers of how much we spent on outages just in the last 2 years. Because it would tell me the numbers if we spent 4 million, 6 million, 8 million in 17 or 16, then guess what? In my head, I got a good idea of what we're going to spend in 18 and 19. Doesn't take a math whiz to figure that out. But all we want to do is get you guys to work with the public, ask questions, and allow these meetings so we can bring it up. That's what we elected you for, to make these decisions so we can come and have a conversation and share it with you. Or if we can't share it with you, you know, have a meeting where we can share it with the mayor and everybody. Because everybody's not going to call you. All your constituents won't pick up the phone and call.
Thank you.
And just to circle back, I'm not trying to rag on y'all.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Go ahead.
And it's getting late.
I promise I'm not, but I do think it's a real issue, and I think it could be done better because, like I said, just because I know, I come to meetings except when I'm out of town. So me knowing, it doesn't mean that the general public knowing. That's my point. And I don't have an issue with the way the mayor told me or when I was told. I have an issue with how does everyone else know? Because I think, you know, this is part of having millennial voters and having, right, younger people come up. We do things differently, and how's the word getting out to them? So that was my first point. My other 2 points, you know, just speaking of data centers, I thought that was a really interesting conversation on the agenda. Data centers are moving to towns that have clean energy. So you can look at Omaha, Nebraska, and what Facebook has done there with an almost 300 megawatt commitment to clean energy. And each place that these companies are putting data centers have large commitments to clean energy. So I think it's something for CWLP and the city to think about moving forward, is that consumer demand is moving towards clean energy. You lost a megawatt last year, and it had to do with Target, which is a big block store, and it had to do with the engineering firm that I can't remember the name of. But when you have larger consumers start to go that route, I think you have to respond to that. And hopefully the IRP will take that into account. I think I would piggyback onto what Jane talked about with public engagement with the IRP. I would also ask the question, are you going to put an end date on it? Because what we've seen happen with the coal ash study is it's kept going and going, but we haven't seen any information come out of that. So I'm really happy to see the IRP on the agenda. I'm really happy to see a pilot solar project on the agenda. I think that's an important direction for the utility to go as consumers are starting to speak about what they want, what type of electricity they want to purchase. I would just ask, what's the turnaround? So that's all I had. Thank you.
That's all right. Thank you. Andy Cott.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair, I believe.
Mr. Chair,
I'm sorry,
while
Jim,
we're
go ahead.
waiting. I mean, I think to the last two speakers' comments about the public input, I think that's essential as a part of the planning process. I've not been involved in those type of plans before, but it makes sense to have public input. It also makes sense to have an opportunity as a part of the planning process for that to be formalized. And I think an end date is a good idea, at least an estimated end date, because that was an accurate statement.
It's, I kind of forgot to mention that. It's about 6 months, basically, is what we're hearing, at least from one of the T when we originally talked to them. We haven't heard from the other two bidders, but, you know, assuming that they'll have something similar.
While you're up there, I apologize. There wasn't no.
That was for in regards to the integrated resource plan.
No, you don't.
I just want to apologize in public. I jumped.
But I do.
Is Andy Cott here?
You do not? He's sick.
Okay.
So I have one thing just to add. The resounding theme here tonight is lack of transparency, from what I've heard from every single speaker. Not just you guys, but the unions that were here before you. So I think that's an issue. If 6 or 7 people are saying we have a problem with transparency at the utility, then that's a problem.
Okay. Anybody else want to address the committee?
Yeah, I called Friday.
Okay, that's all right. Come on up.
Sorry, John.
Good evening. My name's John Williams. I reside at 1427 South College. The need for long-term planning has been heard with CWLP's proposal for an integrated resource plan. I'm thankful for this proposal and for the creation of this committee. The latter must reflect a consensus. This new committee, must reflect a consensus that our utility demands more time and attention. Now that need for a long-term planning must be acted upon by setting a date for the IRP and provisions with teeth for public involvement, critical to outcomes, and not just public input, but early and significant involvement. Who says early involvement? I've referenced this before. Utility managers, city officials, consultants, community leaders with IRP experience. Those who are already making their communities a desirable place to live and work and a place for business to invest. Citizens in various segments of the community, pardon the repetition, must be involved from the start to share their concerns and long-term visions, to raise general energy awareness, to build buy-in. At the IRP core, we'll be looking how supply will meet future demand with energy that's affordable, clean, and reliable. We'll be looking how the supply of electricity will gradually shift from fossil fuels to renewables like wind and solar farms, and gradually shift from large-scale centralized operations to small-scale individual applications. There I think of Crawford, Murphy, and Tilley, what they've done. That's the supply side. As to demand, we'll look at how demand for electricity is met not only by supply, but also the not-so-visible efficiencies, not as visible as smokestacks, that drive down electrical use on the customer front or do more with less. Accomplished with energy efficiency in buildings and renovations, with appliances, namely energy efficient air conditioning, heating units, insulation, and so on. It should be noted that most jobs are and will continue to be in the renewables and energy efficiency, mostly related to the installation end. Needless to say, jobs are vitally important to individuals, families, and communities, so it is vitally important to plan for these unstoppable changes in energy, rather than sit unprepared and fall further behind these forward-acting communities. Besides the concern for our energy sources, the supply and demand side, jobs, our budgetary, our overcapacity, our water, and environmental concerns will be put on the IRP table to finally and directly deal with, or at least they should be, if it's a IRP with teeth in it. We need to think about this vastly different future by first envisioning it, and envisioning the new role our utility will undertake over these next couple of decades. Gradually shifting from less of a producer and distributor of power services to more of a conductor or coordinator of power services, having more to do on the demand side. With an IRP, we can begin to gradually reposition our utility and its jobs. As I previously said, we are now uniquely positioned with the proposed IRP to capitalize on our many impressive resources: a public utility, a forward-looking, the mayor laughed at me, a forward-looking mayor, a forward-looking city council, a forward-looking CWLP staff, along with fired-up community individuals, which you've seen tonight. So let's set a date and start explaining and listening to each other beginning with a tutorial on IRPs, mapping out a process with rules and a schedule. Let's get this going, this IRP going with maximum public involvement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Go.
I think you hit a home run putting the IRP on this agenda, so I compliment anyone who had the foresight to put the IRP on the agenda.
I followed Doug Brown. I thank him for doing that.
So I think we've got some really good topics on this agenda. You know, I think it would help if we get the agenda out ahead of time and maybe even offer the opportunity for the alderman to weigh in on the agenda. I think it's important, though, also, we got to make note of the fact that half hour, 30 minutes of our meeting tonight had nothing to do with anything on this agenda. It had to do with the demolition contract. And so I think we need to find a way to handle, you know, topics that aren't really on the agenda and how much time we devote to those topics.
I understand. Okay. I just want to make it clear, you know, I know some of the speakers were not satisfied with the way the agenda was set up, but just let me tell you, this committee was formed to better inform the City Council about the function and the operation of the utility. You're looking for a forum type of situation. I understand that. I think maybe you need to take that back to the mayor, because this is not going to be a forum. This is going to be a utility committee where we're going to be able to ask questions to the utility, have a better understanding as aldermen so we can make tough decisions. I get the point. You want the forum. I get it. It makes a lot of sense, but this is not going to be the place for it. So, yes, go.
Isn't the mayor continuing? I don't know. I guess Mr. Zirkle, is he continuing the CWLP forums that he had? I thought even though we're. What's that?
This was supposed to take the place of it.
And
this is taking. Hold on. I'm just asking a question. Is he?
This was supposed to take the place of it.
Well, this is not going to take its place. This is going to be a committee for the utility, for the aldermen to understand what's going on. If you want to hold a forum, go at it. But this is not going to be the forum place. This is going to be a committee for the utility so we can better understand it. If you want to do the forum, if you want to have that type of situation, you need to go see the mayor, because we're not doing it here. Well, I'm the chairman, so I'll do what I want. So, with that, any other comments?
Move for dismissal.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.